All right, and we are live. Welcome back, guys. Sorry, a little late getting everything started here. I've actually severely improved the stream. Hopefully, I bought a bunch of new equipment here and put in some shelving to make this hopefully more seamless than previous streams where you guys have watched me click around and try to find the right tabs and all that stuff. I think this is going to be a little smoother. I've figured out the software more and ironed out some of the kinks. But you guys can let me know how it works on your end in the comments. And speaking of which, give me a comment whenever you can. As always, it just helps me know that I'm actually live for one of you guys to just say, hey, from Arkansas or wherever you're coming from. Helps a lot. And let me know if the audio is working and everything else. But I'll just keep going here. So what's new in the shop? The biggest thing for me really is the tone wood shop. I have been cutting up new woods to put on my website. Spessart oak with this really phenomenal flake figure on it. A very unique wood. And we've got some Zeracote and Tasmanian blackwood, Wangi, a lot of the woods that I personally like to use and like to keep in the shop. That's kind of the idea of the tone wood shop at Eric Schaefer Guitars. Before we get started, let's go through our housekeeping here. If you like what I do and you get a little something out of the lessons that I teach, then go to ericschaeferguitars.com and there you will see the schedule of dates for my hands-on workshops. The next workshop, by the way, is starting in March. I forget exactly what date that is, but if you go to ericschaeferguitars.com, you can see for yourself. And then I've got other dates going well out into summer and fall of 2026. What do we also have at ericschaeferguitars.com? The online course, Building an OM Acoustic. There's over 60 full-length instructional videos there. Hey guys, if you're like just getting started, or even if you're not just getting started, this really is the best way to build your first guitar or your second or your third because it is so detail oriented. This is not some time-lapse speed through of a guitar build. Like I said, over 60 full-length videos. So all of the detail is in there from the very beginning of a build to finishing and buffing and all that good stuff. And then I guess I already mentioned this, but I'll pull up the slide anyway for the Tone Wood Shop. That is live now. So if you guys want to check out some of the unique woods that I am putting on my website, you can go to ericschaeferguitars.com. Okay, so with that said, I don't see any comments yet, but like I said, just throw them in there. Give me a shout, guys. And we are going to jump over to, you know what, I'm going to do this a little bit different. And we're going to just run through some YouTube comments first and then get to the Discord. That's the members only Discord where students of my hands-on workshops or my online courses, they get access to this private members Discord. It's a big community in there, over 500 builders in there helping each other out through the process, and myself included. I typically like to respond to your comments live here on the live stream, and I use the Discord to do that. So we'll do the Discord last, is what I was starting to say. We're going to start with YouTube, and we'll just breeze through some of those questions and comments. Sorry, give me 1 second here, guys. I said this would be smoother, and I lied. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to skip that one. We'll start with Alex Shevchenko. Writes, I would trust you to repair my guitars. Okay. Well, thank you, man. You know, actually, I wanted to include that comment just to say that I might actually be taking in some repairs soon and doing some videos with repairs, just because I haven't done that in a while. I did a bridge reglue recently and made a video of that, and it just reminded me how much I actually enjoy doing repairs and how much I enjoy making videos specifically about those repairs. So I think it's time to get a little bit into that again. So, hey, if you guys have any repairs that you want to send out, yeah, just ericschaeferguitars.com and we can make that happen. Let's see, the verse shed writes supremely clear. So this is on a video I did on how a truss rod works. Especially the demo starting at 142 where the actions of left-right adjustments is made obvious. Well done. I've seen several uploads where the demonstrator said it sounds complicated, but, and then proceeded with a narrative that really did make it hard to understand what was going on. Your uncomplicated and simple visual demo said it all. I think you get the, yeah, okay. I think I get the gist of your very nice comment. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen that video, I explain how a truss rod works very simply. It's a very popular video for that reason. I don't know why anyone makes that complicated. Truss rods are incredibly simple mechanisms. It is literally just a steel rod with two nuts, a nut welded at each end, and those nuts are, the one nut is reverse threaded in relationship to the other nut. And that's it. And then that threaded rod, because the threads are in opposite directions, when you turn it, the metal rod that's attached to the two nuts can't help but bow outward. Or if you turn it in the opposite direction, the threaded rod bows outward. And that's how a double action truss rod works. Very, very simple. Where Chris Eberson writes, where can I easily buy Arola pine, aka Swiss stone pine? I don't even know what that is, for violin sound posts. Oh, yeah, this is the wrong place for that, unfortunately. Sorry, Chris. That's funny. This is on a really old, it might even be the first Q&A I ever did from 2018. Wow. So yeah, these sort of violin, cello type questions, honestly, I'm just not the guy for. I'm not even familiar with the roll of pine. Actually, a little bit later on, we'll be talking about wolf notes, and there is a good tie in there to especially cellos because that is, wolf notes are much talked about and a very serious problem in the bowed instrument world. But we'll get to that. That's a little cliffhanger for you guys. All right. If the first thing you do is eyeball the measurements, you can't call it a master class. I disagree. There's a lot of things you eyeball in woodworking. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, here's a question from Flying Carrot on a fret removal video that I did called The Proper Way to Pull a Fret. Very short, very simple video showing you how to remove frets. And he writes, hey, Eric, would it be possible to do it without the nippers? That's a good question. You know, these questions like these are funny where I know you're, when you're being that cheap that you don't want to, you want to find a way to do it without the nippers. Like nippers are not expensive. And plus they don't have to be like StuMac, specifically fret nippers for nipping the ends off of frets. If you don't have access to some sort of nipper, I mean, your string clippers are a kind of nipper. You'd be probably better off not using those on frets because you'll be damaging the string clippers. But I don't know, man. Look around. You'll have something that fits the description of a nipper. And even better if it is in the same orientation as a fret nipper. And I say that because some string clippers have the cutting edges are more like scissors. So they're on the sides, whereas fret nippers are like jaws like this, where the nippers are on the ends rather than the sides. Okay. And when they're on the ends like that, it's going to be a lot easier to get that under the fret wire and lift up, rather than trying to get the scissor edges under the fret wire. But without having used string clippers myself for that job, because I have nippers, that's all I can think of. Like, you got to have something to get under there. But I wouldn't go jacking around under there with like a, I don't know, a flathead screwdriver or something. Maybe that's what you're thinking about doing. It's just not going to work. Just shell out a little bit of money for some nippers. Again, don't have to be for guitar making, but just go to a hardware store and find something that works. And if the nippers, I will add this, if you buy nippers from a hardware store and they have a very rounded over front face, very sort of oblong on the front face, I would grind that back so that it's flatter. And that's going to help you rest the nippers on the fretboard and actually get the jaws under the fret wire. Okay. But some things you just can't get around. Let's see. Dan Ingram writes, fantastic building techniques, my friend. That's going to be a sweet guitar. It is a sweet guitar. Actually, the one he's talking about in this video, that was one of my favorites I sold to a guy in Miami. A guitar number 56, if I've got the number right. And he says, cedar has a beautiful warm tone. The way you've scalloped the bracing is such a soft touch with the chisel. Very interesting and informative. Actually, interesting note about that guitar. A lot of people have seen that video and commented on how much scalloping I did. I actually found that I made the top a little bit too light in the end. And I noticed a slight bulge behind the bridge after I strung it up. And I actually had to do some restorative work going in through the sound hole and attaching, removing a brace and reattaching a new brace in there. It was very difficult. So I certainly remember that. But yeah, I think on that one, I felt like I overdid it just a little bit. Okay, Mark Macy writes, how cool. I wish I was there with my fellow veterans. And this is on a video I did called 2 Military Vets Building 2 Guitars in My Shop. So shout out to Reveille Guitars for that. Reveille Guitars is a nonprofit that I don't run myself or anything. I'm not really even a part of the nonprofit, but that nonprofit, a guy named Benjamin Channels, amazing dude, he runs that nonprofit for special operators who are transitioning out of the military, collecting donations to give those guys a free guitar building workshop. And currently they come to me for that guitar building workshop. Let's see, he writes, it'll be a good indoors hobby while I care for my wife of 43 years who is well into Alzheimer's. Oh man, that's hard. Yeah. Rick, okay, and we got one from Rick Malloy. Rick Malloy writes, it takes a lot to do it. I think folks don't understand how long and annoying it can be. I removed a drop top from a guitar and it took forever. So Rick Malloy is commenting on a previous Q&A where I was talking about removing bridges for a bridge reglue, and how in the current environment of instruction that you see out on YouTube, I don't feel like other presenters really give the actual process of working the knives, the putty knives under the bridge. They don't give that its proper explanation, enough time of explaining how you work those knives under there. And usually they'll get to that point and they'll just say, okay, then you heat up some spatulas and work them against each other. And then they fast forward through that whole process and get to the bridge re-glue part, which I always find re-gluing a bridge, if you're a guitar maker, like you know how to glue a bridge. So really, aside from the actual process of gluing it, which will be the same for you, all you're doing is cleaning up the top and the surface, the mating surface of the bridge. Not that difficult if you already know how to glue bridges. So I think the real skill to acquire there is what you're doing with the putty knives. And it always takes longer than you think. Okay. And so it's good to see in the video that I'm putting out, which is not out yet, but once it's out, you'll see, because I'll show the whole process without cutting it and without speeding it up and talking you through it every second, because there's a lot of nuance there that you gain from just simply removing multiple bridges. Okay. And that's hard to gain from just simple step-by-step instructions. It is a skill. Okay. And let's see what else we got here. A lot of comments. I'm really looking for questions in here, but we'll probably jump over to, we'll jump over to the Discord because there's some good questions in there. And actually the main thing that I want to talk about, hold on, let me pull up the Discord here. Boom. There we go. Getting a little better every time, guys, a little quicker. Okay, so now we're in the Discord. The main thing I wanted to do today, kind of the reason I'm even having a live stream, is to correct something from the previous live stream where someone had a question and I didn't really give a good answer, honestly. It was when the question is about wolf notes, and it's always a very complicated question whenever you're talking about the modal movements of the top and wolf notes, and how do I make changes to my guitar to meaningfully change the tone. Now, it's one thing to talk about how to do that when you're building a guitar, but on a guitar that you've already built and you're saying, hey, how do I adjust the tone in some way, it gets a lot more slippery to talk about. All right, so, but Larry Kuhn here, he really did an A+ job here, because I dropped the ball in that question. I kind of answered it like, honestly, it was the kind of question like in the moment, I didn't even want to answer it because it's a difficult question. And so I kind of threw it away, saying almost like there was nothing you could do about it. But actually, there are things you can do about wolf notes. And so let's talk about that. Let me find the question right here. Here we go. All right. Larry Kuhn, let me skip the beginning part of this. Larry Kuhn writes, you looked like you were searching for an explanation for dipoles and tripoles. A way that I like to explain them is to compare them to playing a guitar, to which guitar players will relate. You play an open string and the whole thing vibrates as one unit. That's the same as monopole, okay? Because I was talking about the modal movements, not just of the top, but the modal movements that all things, strings, guitar tops, this shelf right here, that everything experiences. And specifically, as we're getting into here, the difference between monopole and dipole, okay? But you can get the tripole and go on and on from there. So again, well, just to draw you back into the comment here, he's saying you have an open string, you play the open E string, for example, and that string is going to move in that monopole mode. Now play a 12th fret harmonic on the same string. The string is not vibrating at the 12th fret. You can even keep your finger there, but it's vibrating both below and above the 12th fret. That's like a dipole. There's a spot where the top is not vibrating called the node, and it is vibrating on either side of the node. So a dipole is like a 12th fret harmonic. Likewise, if you play a harmonic on the 7th fret, you're cutting the string into thirds. So the 7th fret is not vibrating, That's a node at the 7th fret. The part that's not vibrating is always called a node, by the way. An antinode is what you call the point of most excursion between the nodes, basically the center point between any node. But I digress a little bit there. He goes, there's a spot where the top is not, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. 7th fret is not vibrating. Okay. You're cutting the string into thirds, so the 7th fret is not vibrating, and that's a node. And since we cut the string into thirds, there's another node at the 19th fret. From the nut to the 7th, from the 7th to the 19th, and from the 19th to the bridge are all vibrating. This is a tripole, where the top has 2 nodes not vibrating and 3 areas that are vibrating. And then he writes, you also looked like you were searching for an explanation of wolf notes. And I was. And I think you got one part wrong. The way I explain wolf notes is to say that the guitar is resonating, and the guitar has certain frequencies where it resonates strongly and others where it resonates weakly. One such strong point is the resonant frequency of the air inside the body, which could be around 70 hertz. Another is the monopole frequency of the top, say somewhere around 170 hertz. The back has its own monopole frequency. The dipoles and tripoles have their own frequencies, and the harmonic overtones of these frequencies also resonate strongly. If one of these strong resonant peaks happens to correspond to a frequency of a note played on the guitar, let's say the back monopole frequency is 220 hertz, and this exactly corresponds to the open A string. Then that open A will be reinforced by the guitar's natural resonances. It will be louder and have more sustain than other notes played on the guitar. That's a wolf note. Wolf notes can even work the other way, where the note is quieter and dies off quickly compared to other notes. When wolf notes are audibly noticeable, then that's a problem. Yeah, so that, just to comment on that slightly, that's all correct and perfect. I think what I was saying before was that wolf notes are basically like dead notes, which might sound opposite of saying that, hey, this the frequency of the air cavity, for example, is reinforcing this note. It's going to be louder, and that's true. Wolf notes should be louder in theory, but because the sustain dies off rapidly, you're basically getting a sharp, percussive, like loud note with less sustain. And so the dead part of it, the reason some people will interpret a wolf note as a very dead note and some will interpret it as a very pronounced note is because both are actually kind of true. And depending on various things, you might notice the shortness of the note, the short duration, more than the extra energy producing the loudness of the note, but actually both are happening. You know, one thing, as I alluded to earlier, wolf notes come from, and even today are still more prominently talked about in the bowed instrument world, violins, cellos, for example, because with a bowed instrument, you're not simply plucking a string and then just letting the string do its thing and die off. You are feeding energy into that string. So as you hit a particular wolf note, let's stick with his example of that A string, that A440, or I think he said A220. As you're playing that note, you're continuously vibrating the string. And so there's this feedback loop where you get this extra energy from, let's say, the air cavity resonance or the modal movement of the top that is reinforcing the energy of that particular frequency. And as you continue to feed into it, it just gets louder and louder and worse and more irritated and destabilized. So that is why in the guitar world, I think wolf notes, to a lot of people, they don't even know what they are. A lot of guitar players, I mean, and they don't even really talk about them. But there's a particular crowd of people where once they hear about wolf notes, now they think they hear them all the time. And it's real easy to kind of chase things that, you know, you're not really sure they're there, right? But anyway, let me get back on track to what he was saying there. I forget why I was even digressing on that particular note. Oh, because he was saying what yeah, what I got wrong about what a wolf note is. That's right. So yeah, a wolf note is exactly what he said. It's when you have certain resonant peaks, either from the peak resonance of your air cavity. I think that's the most common way to get a wolf note, or it's matching up with a peak resonance off of your top. I don't know how common the back. My suspicion would be that the back plays less into that. Personally, I would gravitate towards thinking it's the air cavity first, and then I would explore the top secondarily. And I don't know if I would ever necessarily get to the back. Okay, so now he writes, and here's the part I think you got wrong. A builder usually can cure a wolf note by moving the corresponding resonant peak away from the plucked note, so the note is not reinforced. The way to do this depends on which resonant peak is involved and whether it needs to be moved up or down. For example, enlarging the sound hole will raise the resonant frequency in the air chamber. Increasing the mass of the bridge reinforcement by adding glue or gluing something on the inside will lower the top's monopole frequency. And carefully shaving braces, accomplished by sticking your hand through the sound hole and using a small plane to shave off material, can move the frequency of many other resonant peaks. While these changes can be applied to a finished guitar, the earlier the builder can find wolf notes, the better. For example, if the resonant frequency of the air chamber needs to be lowered, then the sound hole needs to be smaller. This can be done by adding or thickening a sound hole reinforcement, which is much less work before the finish is applied than after. Absolutely. So that's perfect. You 100%, Larry Kuhn. You nailed all of that. I appreciate you taking the time to write all that out, actually. One thing I want to say about your prescription of curing wolf notes, it's 100% correct, but I know people will hear that and think that's too difficult for them to do. You know, they might think, okay, how am I supposed to figure out whether or not I need to add mass? Let me put it this way. There's in any case, when you have a wolf note, there's 4 things you can do to move that resonant frequency. You can add mass, you can reduce mass, you can add stiffness, or you can reduce stiffness. Okay? Any one of those 4 things. And if you read or watch videos of, I suppose, anything Trevor Gore has put out there, he's the best on this. I don't go deep enough into all this stuff and know half the things that he talks about. So if you really want to go deep on this, I would check out Trevor Gore. He has 2 books. I forget the titles, but if you look them up, Trevor Gore and Gerard Gillette, you can't go wrong with those books. Fair warning, it's going to be a lot of homework to read them. So maybe look for some videos he's put out online as well. That might be a little easier to digest. But the one thing that I have kind of come to a conclusion of from reading the amount that I have read of Trevor Gore is if you read what he says, you'll find that he talks about ways of essentially tapping the top to figure out where, if you have a resonant peak from either the air cavity or the modal movements of the top itself, that matches up with your string, and various ways of figuring that out. Basically using a little mallet, tapping around on the top, for example, and a microphone to collect the sound, and a frequency analyzer on your computer. There's some free ones out there you can download. You can go through all that trouble there, but one thing you'll realize in conclusion when you go through all this is that what you have is basically a somewhat unlikely coincidence happening, meaning your top, for example, wants to resonate readily at, again, let's stick with 220 hertz, and your A string wants to resonate at 220 hertz, so they feed into each other. And it's actually fairly unlikely that you're going to get such a close match in frequencies that you end up with these wolf notes, right? At least very noticeable ones on a guitar. Much more common in the bowed instrument world, but on a guitar, because of that short duration, it's fairly difficult to notice when you have that problem. So, but one thing you'll find from listening to Trevor Gore and people like him is that the prescription is essentially to move that frequency, either the modal movement of your top or the air cavity frequency, move it off of that 220. And if you think about it, it really doesn't matter if you move it in either direction, right? You could make it sharper or make it flatter. Either way, in the one case, you're going to remove material, and in the other case, you're going to add material, right? But it kind of doesn't matter which one you do. So if you think about it that way, then you'll find that it actually doesn't matter which of those four things you do. If you reduce mass, increase mass, or reduce stiffness or increase stiffness in that area. Either way, you're going to move it off of that sort of perfect point that it's resting on, if that makes sense. So anyway, I thought that was just amazing what you put in there, Larry Kuhn, and so I wanted to read it all. And yeah, that's that. Let's see what else we got here. Let's go back to the topics. And I got to keep an eye on the time here because this has to be a little bit shorter than usual, guys. Let's see. Okay. Tom Casti. Okay, this is a good one. And there's kind of a couple threads here to go through, but I'll give you just the gist here. Tom has these cracks in the back of his guitar. In the first post, he writes that he dropped the guitar, but looking at these cracks, I don't see how dropping it could have caused these cracks. This is classic drying out kind of thing. And so essentially, he built this guitar and he noticed some cracks in the wood before he started the finish. And I'm not sure if he filled them a little bit before he started the finish, but when he started finishing, that's when Tom really noticed the cracks. That's how finishing works, right? It really highlights, especially the glossier the finish, it really highlights these little surface imperfections that you otherwise might not have noticed. And so halfway through the finishing process, Tom filled those cracks with super glue. And I think he says thin, yeah, he does say thin CA glue. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. With thin CA glue, and then he sanded the whole thing back and refinished it. And then he says, and after 7 to 8 coats of Tru Oil, the cracks again begin to appear. And in this picture that he has here, honestly, like the only crack I can identify in the picture, and I know pictures aren't the best sometimes, is this one right in the middle where my mouse is. So it actually looks pretty good. And here's the thing, Tom. When you have cracks that go any direction other than with the grain, and these do not go with the grain, they go across the grain, the best you can hope for is to fill those cracks with an appropriate color so they kind of match the color scheme of the guitar. Now we're talking about cracks that go all the way through, so they can't be sanded out or anything like that. Without replacing the back, they will be visible. And this, with this picture you have here, I mean, this looks like how I've done repairs like these, and this is how I expect it to come out. This is where I'd be happy with it, honestly. I'm not sure if it looks way worse in person. So that's the first thing. Now, the other thing is he talks about filling it with, he's using thin, and I think he means like ultra thin or water thin. That might be the problem as to why you are finding that you need to fill it again and again. The ultra thin or water thin super glues are never really going to fill a crack. They'll just keep, especially an open crack all the way through to the other side, they'll just keep flooding out onto the underside because they don't have enough body to start to fill that. I like to use a black super glue for this, of course, because it'll match really well. And as far as the viscosity, it's described as 20. So ultra thin or water thin is a 10. If you use a 20, which is more like a medium viscosity, it's not thick. You don't use a thick one or a gel super glue, but a medium-ish viscosity like a 20 will actually have enough to build and fill that crack. You'll probably still have to do multiple fills, but you can do those back to back, meaning you fill it a little bit, spray it. I'll often spray it right away because I don't want it to just flood out through the other side. I'll drop it in there and spray it real quick so that it'll harden before it has a chance to make it, you know, all the way through the crack. Now you have something, a little bit of body to the fill to build up and off of. And then I'll just do another fill, sand it a little bit right there, another fill, sand it a little bit until I'm up at the surface. So I hope that helps. And then the other thing too is this to me makes me want to think about my environment that I'm building the guitars in, because if I know a lot of you guys are very switched on to how you should treat your guitars after they're built as far as the humidity is concerned. And of course, the common wisdom is to keep your guitars at the standard room temperature relative humidity, which is 45%. But a lot of builders then come to the conclusion that they should keep their shops at 45%. And sometimes even professional, highly regarded builders, I find, are doing this. And I still think it's the wrong conclusion. What you want for assembling guitars is a shop that is somewhat just a little bit drier than your typical room temperature humidity, that 45%. I aim for 35% in my shop. And here's why. By far, most of your problems are going to come from drying out and not from over humidification. Also, the places your guitar will travel to are far more likely to be extra dry, especially in the winter, rather than extra humid. Of course, check your own lifestyle for this. Maybe you're someone who frequently travels to the Bolivian rainforest and you like to bring your guitar with you. Okay, you're a special character then. But most people, especially in the United States, the places you expect to go are actually, if anything, going to be too dry. You might go to Tucson, Arizona to visit a friend or something like that. Or maybe you're selling the guitar and it's going to someone in Tucson, Arizona. So if you build your guitars, if you keep your shop and your wood stash around 35, then now let's say you take your guitar to Tucson, Arizona, and it's 15 or 20. Well, let's take that 20. Now you're going from 35 to 20. That's only a 15 percentage point difference. Not really a huge deal. Whereas if you built your guitars at 45, and let's even say you had a little bit of a rough week, because it's hard to constantly maintain a very precise humidity, maybe you climbed up a little bit and it was actually at 50 or 55. Well, now 50 or 55 dropping all the way down to 20 is actually significant, and easily significant enough to produce those kind of cracks that you're seeing. And I think Tom bought this wood from me too, and you can tell me if that's true, Tom. And so, you know, another thing I would add is consider your source. In this case, it definitely came from my vault downstairs where I keep all the wood. I keep that at 35. And so it's important to make sure you're getting your wood from a place where it's going to be kept at a good humidity as well. So this, if it came from here, should have been at least at a good starting point. But then when it travels to your shop, if it sits there for 2 months before you start working on it, now it becomes acclimated to whatever you have it at. And let's just say you have it at 55. Now you assemble it. And that's the key part, is once you start assembly, you're now locking all the various parts into position with each other. And then when the guitar leaves the shop and goes to a much drier area, or it, you know, goes into your living room and maybe it's sitting next to a little bit too close to a vent or something like that, you know, the room humidity as read off a hygrometer might be reasonable, might only be like 30% or something, but it might be way less right by that vent or wherever you have it. So all things to consider. When I see the problem here that you're having, the number one thing to me is what can I do to prevent this in the future, and less about what I can do to fix this now, because I think the only way to fix that is to put a new back onto it. And I don't think, I mean, that's just starting over completely, and you don't want to do that. I think just fill the cracks and use a thicker viscosity, and they should actually fill well, but don't expect them to vanish completely in a way where you can't even find them, because they are crossing, not going the same direction as the prevailing grain. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all I got for you guys today. Please keep the questions coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.